Alright, hey, how's everybody doing? I hope you're doing okay. Alright, good. Today I got something juicy. Oh, excuse me. Oh, sorry, that was foul. Here, no, if it comes up, it comes. I'm not going to sit there and hold my burp because it's camera started. It takes too much time to edit this. We only got a little bit of time anyway. Okay, so I did a video before. I did a subject matter before, and it turns out, you know, I took another look at the subject matter, and you know, taking another look at the subject matter, there's a couple of things that like popped up, and it's cool. You know, it's cool because I'm very excited. Very excited. Very excited. So today we're going to be looking at a couple comments from Senator Beacon. You know, like Alabama Senator. I think it's Scott Beacon. So let's all come over here. Now, Senator Beacon of Alabama calls blacks Aboriginal people. Now, if you want to see what I see, that's what you got to type in. Now, we've taken some time and we've investigated this before. Now we're going to take a different approach. Hold on, I've tangled my camera wire. Yes. Show them the wall. Yes, look at the wall. Alright, so now you have something. I like this one. They titled this, "Dumb Alabama Senator Calls Blacks Aborigines." Okay, so when we take a look at some of these, we start to get like a couple different, well, looks like I gotta reload all these. Alright. Now, it turns out he was being investigated on federal corruption trial. Okay? So he is being wiretapped when he made these statements. Now, I want you to listen because these statements are on federal record. Alabama is currently going through a major federal corruption trial, and this is in 2011, June 19th, the 19th of June, 2011, regarding alleged bribes offered to state legislators. 4 are on trial by representatives of the state gambling industry. So this has to do with gambling and bribing state representatives. Now, the overall issue of gambling in the state is an ongoing political battle. The state has dog tracks and bingo halls, but the focus of late has been on the question of electronic gaming machines. Part of the investigation was conducted by witnesses wearing wires, including State Senator Scott Beeson, not Beacon, of Republican of Gardendale. So it's Gardendale, Alabama. Transcripts of Beeson's wiretaps became of issue this week at the trial in Montgomery. So check this out. So during this investigation on, what is it again? Gambling, and if they'll have electronic machines. I'm wondering if bribes are being handed out, pushed back and forth to get electronic machines. In one conversation, Beeson and others discussed their fears that many black voters would turn up at the polls if a constitutional amendment on electronic bingo was placed at the ballot. Ha 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 ha. That's great. All right. So that's one joke that they made. He says, every black in this state will be bused to the polls, said a person who was not identified on the transcript. They know who said it. They're just not, they just won't tell you. It says Larry Dixon, who was a Republican state. See, this is all about Republicans, so a Democrat might have said this, or another Republican, who knows. Larry Dixon, who was a Republican state senator from Montgomery at the time, said the voters will be taken to the polls on HUD financed buses. So they're just making more jokes and more jokes. Now, this is where it gets kind of strange. This is Beeson responded, that's right, it will be busing extra. Alright, so he tries to make a joke, and you can see it's kind of not funny. I mean, the bingo thing, a lot of mobs play bingo. That's kind of funny. Affordable buses. When I said protest in Washington, people said, "Hey, are you providing travel arrangements?" That's kind of, to some that's a joke, to some that's a serious question. So in another conversation, Beeson and others are discussing the distressed economy of Greene County, home to Green Track. Quote, that's y'all's Indians, said former state rep Benjamin Lewis. He is a Republican of Dothan. So, when blacks are brought up in a conversation, Beeson and Lewis are talking. Blacks are brought up, and others are distressed. In another conversation, Beeson and others are discussing the distressed economy of Greene. Says, yeah, that's y'all's Indians. Now, Beeson tries to correct him. He says, they're Aborigines. Oh, you got original, you have A plus B, right? They're Aborigines. They're not Indians. So Lewis has been taught a little bit more than Beeson, whether you understand this or not. Lewis understands that they're Indians, hence 12 tribes. Beeson separates them, calling Beeson considers the Canaanites Indians and the Negroes just Aborigines. After the remarks became public, Beeson claimed he didn't remember the conversation, and indeed didn't know why he used this term. Well, because he's a Freemason. That's why. He can't tell you where he learned that. That's why it's wonderful. It's already in court. It's already floating in court. If you went to court, all you'd have to do is say, hey, I'd like to bring in this section of evidence. Senator Beeson's comments. We are Aboriginal. That means we were here before Columbus. Columbus isn't Aboriginal. He says, I don't know why. I don't use that term normally. Excuse me. I skipped a little bit. As a Republican state senator who secretly recorded conversations for the FBI, Thursday he testified that he couldn't, so he was the rat. He's the state senator who secretly recorded conversations for the FBI. So Beeson was the rat. Thursday, that he couldn't explain why he called black customers of a casino aborigines. Alabama's Democratic leader called for his resignation, and the Republican Party chairman defended his reputation. I don't use that term normally. I don't know where it even came from that day, says Senator Scott Beeson of Gardendale as he testified Thursday in federal court, where he is a key prosecution in the State House corruption case. So, it says the Courtroom Chronicles blog adds, when Segal asked Beeson if he meant that people of Greene County were descendants of the Australian indigenous group when he used the word Aborigines, Beeson said he didn't recall what he meant. When Segal asked him if he meant it in a derogatory, offensive way, Beeson also responded that he couldn't recall what he meant by the remark. Isn't that interesting? Alright. So, states, this reminds me of when George Allen claimed he didn't know why he said Mecca, macaca. Although I must confess, I do think it unlikely that he used the word Aborigines will great frequently. But this is an example of self-censorship due to the presence of a wire. One does wonder, as defense attorney Bobby Segal asked during the testimony over the transcripts, what must you say, Senator Beeson, when you don't know you are on tape? Well, they make it sound, this article makes it sound like he is, as a Republican state senator who secretly recorded, not secretly was recorded, secretly recorded conversations for the FBI. And then Segal, obviously, the prosecutor, says, what must you say, Senator Beeson, when you don't know you are on tape? Again, they make it sound like Beeson is the one that's wearing the wire. Yes, I do understand that of the things that one could say, this is hardly the worst one might conjure. But there is something highly problematic about a politician, especially from the Deep South, finding it necessary to group black voters under a label that is clearly not intended as a term of affection. Well, hell no. If you stole the land from the Aboriginals, then no. It states the entire tenor of the discussion comes across as condescending towards a segment of Alabama's citizenry because of the color of their skin. And there is the irony, of course, that African Americans are hardly Aboriginal. See, now that's where he's wrong. The writer of this article, who seems to confuse the reader of what Beeson's role is in this, see, the writer believes you're African American. See how he says that? African Americans? He doesn't even write black Americans when this senator calls you Aboriginals. So it says, they are hardly Aboriginal to the region, nor are Anglos for that matter. Well, we all know that. And that the ancestors of most of that segment of our populace hardly came here of their own violation. Well, we'll be discussing that. Well, let's just go ahead and put this on now. It's a good time for this.
For a dam and to outline a man-made lake called today Buckeye Lake, which is still here. If you go there and go fishing, all the stone around Buckeye Lake is from the Great Stack. It was the largest stone mound in North America. Absolutely huge. 10,000 wagon loads to take it completely down. You can imagine. 10,000 wagons to take the stack down. And there's still some of it left on the edge if you know where to go see it. When they got down to the bottom, they did find an earthen mound in the center, and they found some smaller mounds that circled it all the way around. Interesting, it happened to be 12. Big mound in the center. David Wyrick and 7 or 8 guys, they went for it right away, dug it straight down, and they ran into a huge oak coffin. They took the oak lid off the coffin, and there was a skeleton of a man laid out. And probably within 30 to 40 minutes, once that had touched the air, everything began really to crumble before their eyes. The bones just started to disintegrate.
Did they close the lid real quick?
No, they didn't. And then they found out that the coffin was laying on a platform of stone and wood. And so they figured, well, let's keep going. Maybe there's more. When they went under the platform and that stone and rock, they found this outer shell. They found that thing, this gray thing, it's in 2 pieces. And that was held together with cement. And it took them some time. They finally got it apart. They can actually see they broke the top off, getting it apart, but it's been re-glued back on. You can see this in several places. And inside that gray shell was that black stone. I don't know, I don't remember how soon it happened. It was days or weeks. But David Wyrick finally got it into a man who took it to a person who was a Jewish fellow living in the area, a rabbi. And he said, I can read this. He says, this is Hebrew. And the entire stone has a complete rendition of the 10 Commandments from the Old Testament. I mean, complete. Imagine that, 10 Commandments. Pardon now?
Bridge? No.
Well, I don't know how you...
All of the commandments are there.
All 10 Commandments are here. I think it varied from the King James extremely minor. Not a lot of difference. Pretty much right on. What he pointed out was unusual is the way the letters are written. They're very, how would you say it, very, very squarish. And so just for a simple name, they called it block style. Well, no one had ever seen block style Hebrew. So within a matter of weeks after all this came out, this idea of block Hebrew, because they couldn't find it, then the idea of fraud, hoax. Maybe Wyrick made all this up. Because he was a guy who was a proponent of the North American Indians having a Jewish ancestry. Already highly suspicious in newspapers and academia as it was settled at that time. Even though a lot of people accepted it, a lot of people also didn't want to hear that kind of talk. Especially not after all the problems with Joe Smith and Western. You get my drift. So anyway, David was a defender of the stone. He said this is absolutely authentic and that no one ever claimed that it was, put there, he was accused of him and his guys of making this thing and deceiving people. But he was so attacked in the local newspapers and crucified that he started drinking laudanum. I mean, in a big way. And eventually laudanum killed him, and we really feel he probably committed suicide because his reputation just went right down the tube.
He was a surveyor.
He was a surveyor. I mean, this guy was a professional guy. He wasn't just some bumpkin out there digging up Indian mounds for relics. He also found this one that's shaped like the letter V, which you look up here. This is a Hebrew written in a more acceptable pattern, and it says the Holy of Holies, Law of God, King of the earth, and the Word of the Lord. All that's on this yellowish looking stone right here. He found both these stones. The yellowish one was found next to the great octagon, which we're going to go to near the end of the day. And I'll show you on a map when we get to the museum where it was found. But this one here is about 12 miles away, maybe 10. It's over headed toward the interstate, going to the southwest from here. So now, just to jump forward into our day, when the 6-Day War took place with Arabs and the Jews, Well, even though it was short-lived, a group of archaeologists went into the old city right away. They just felt, we don't know if we're going to hang on to this or not, but they started digging the Temple Mount. I mean, immediately. I mean, the guns weren't, the barrels were still hot. These guys were in there. And they found some stones, and they found some writing on the stones, and what they found was, guess what? Block Hebrew. They dated it 100 BC to 100 AD. It was used for a very short time in Jewish history, and they call it monumental Hebrew. So online, you punch in monumental Hebrew, and this will come up. So David Wyrick did not manufacture this language. Okay? But again, every time something in North America is found showing contact across the pond,
It's a fraud.
it's before Columbus, therefore it can't be here. So it has to be fake.
Were those carbon?
Can't carbon date the stone per se, but because of the language, we can tell when that language was in usage. 100 BC, 100 AD. Okay?
I can tell it.
Yeah.
What is on the stone? The requirement of the covenant.
Now, let me tell you.
The other stone, temple stuff.
Let me tell you the rest of the story. Did you see that man standing on the stone? Above his head are 3 letters. You read those right to left, and it says Moshe. That's Moses. Now, if you go online, look up Ellen Wilson, who's in southern England. Ellen Wilson is a champion of contact there with early Israelites, way before even all this stuff was happening. And he writes about a language called Qumri, or Qumrai. That's the early Welsh, but it's a Hebrew-based language. He says this is the 10 Commandments, complete, but it's written in Qumrai. And that's his claim. Non-LDS fellow, not a member of the church. And he says what we call Moshe for Moses doesn't say Moses. Another M word. Mosiah. Interesting. So that's about all I can tell you.
Now, what about the type of stone? Is that?
We don't know. It's never really been identified. Now, Scott Wolter was here a few months back. He examined it. He says, as far as he was concerned, these things are definitely real and authentic. But again, he's a geologist. He can't date it. But he says he may have an idea of what type of stone this actually is. And I think starting December, when number 2 year comes out for America on Earth, you'll see a TV program on his time here examining these stones. He got to take them out of the glass. I mean, really examine. And it's going to be on TV. Maybe he'll tell us then what he thinks about the stone.
So that came out in 2014. It's a clip from another clip, just like I'm doing. And maybe you've seen that on TV briefly, maybe you haven't. But it's still on these hidden channels, we looked at this the other day. So, yeah, the Decalogues too. Alright. Now, you just watched that man give a tour of this, and at no time did he say, look at the image, it's of a man with an afro. See if I can find one of these. There's some that are just the top half. But even that one, you get a little bit more detail. From that angle, you can see the beard more. Okay, so we did some a video on DNA. Good old Scott knows that you guys aren't from Africa. Let's see if this one where he says stupid or dumb. Dumb. This one's kind of short, I believe. It says, throwing around racial slurs is such second nature to members of the Alabama GOP when they cannot even remember. Okay, where did it go? Alright. Decided to leave. They cannot even remember to filter themselves when they are wearing around FBI wires during corruption investigations that forever record their drawling abuses of human language so they can be played back to grand juries. When State Senator Scott Beeson was told that he had appeared on a transcript of a recorded conversation about gambling corruption calling all black people aborigines, he did the decent thing and responded with an apologetic, don't remember that. Must have said it. Important fact. There were no cameras there, so does anyone really care? No cameras, just some bad audio. Everybody is safe. As it's called, the Rob Blagojevich theory of committing atrocities, post-racial America, everyone. Alright, so, just another writer's point of view. My computer just hates me. It wants to die, and I have not let it. So let's get rid of some of these. Alright, so let me go over to this one. I got this from a viewer today. It says failedmessiah.com. I'll make it a little bit bigger, see if I can make it bigger. Oh yeah. New study shows why you researcher others appear to have cooked their genetic books to prove Middle Eastern origin of Jewish people when one may not really exist. What is this saying? This is a researcher saying somebody cooked the books. The worldwide database of DNA genealogy, ethno blah 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 blah, has been tampered with. Isn't that interesting? E1B1A. Well, they gotta say you're related to something if they want everybody to think you're from fucking Africa, right? But E1B1, the various share a common genetic origin. Whoa! I'm Caucasian Jew. Wait, but you're not related to the Ashkenazi Jew. But you guys are lying? Uh-oh. They do not share a common genetic origin. We're talking here about groups that are very heterogeneous and which are connected solely by religion. They're all converts. They've all agreed to pretend to be Negroes. White Negroes. That's why they say they're not white people. Right? Isn't that the game? Gotta understand it's a game. It's a game played on paper, which affects your emotions in real life. It's a game. It's a game. It says they're connected by religion. The genome of European Jews is a mosaic of ancient peoples, and its origin is largely Khazarian. Oh, so that means most of the people of them that say they are Jews today, that force other white people to say that they are Jews, or in our agreement, they're actually Khazarian for the most part. And Polish and Germans. Oh, okay. Excuse me. New study shows Yeshiva University researcher. Others appear to have, cooked the genetic books to prove Middle Eastern origin. Khazaria is Middle Easterners. So it's Middle Easterners, pale-skinned Middle Easterners standing in for you, right? My research refutes 40 years of genetic studies, genetic research, all of which have assumed that the Jews constitute a group that is genetically isolated from other nations, says Dr. L. Hike. Right? That's because Jews were never genetically isolated, making those other studies fatally flawed and very often contradictory. Says now Dr. L. Hayek, in a study that is being called more profound than all those that came before his combined, has exposed that fatal flaw and is the first to propose a viable way resolve those contradictions. Haaretz reports. The answer to the origin of Jewish people, Hayek found is startling. For most of us, our Jewish origins really do begin with the Khazars, the medieval Central Asian people whose ruling elite and perhaps its merchant class as well converted to Judaism. Okay, so this just puts DNA data right behind Arthur Kessler's book, right? The 13th tribe. The nation of people that pretend to be all 12 tribes. I mean, that's what they're doing. If they pretend to be two of the tribes or three of the tribes, and none of the tribes look like them at all, they took Israel on identity theft. They lived there in your stead. That's why God says He's just going to destroy them. And that land, because that land is not important. The only part of this land that's even important right now is the court systems, where the court systems sit in Utah. Nothing else is important. That's not even from my thoughts. That's from studies. I'm going to show you right at the end of this. Now it says 32-year-old does his work at the School of Public Health of Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. His study was published earlier this month as The Missing Link of Jewish European Ancestry, contrasting the Rhineland German and the Khazarian hypotheses. Right, they're fucking Khazars and Germans, pretending to be you. Netanyahu is a fucking German. Oh, I'm sorry, his blood goes back to the people buried in the Rhineland, which is Germany. Look, I don't even need to keep reading this shit, because they're not going to tell you. Here. Elek found that European Jews' genome was mostly Western European. that's right. According to his findings, the dominant element in the genetic makeup of European Jew is Khazarian. Among Central European Jews, this makes up the largest part of their genome. 38% for East European Jews. It does the same as 30. He found that the European Jews are mostly Western Europeans. They're just Western Europeans pretending to be people that ain't from Europe. But their blood says differently. They are primarily of Western Europe origin, which is rooted in the Roman Empire, and the Middle Eastern origin, whose source is probably Mesopotamia. Although it's possible that part of the component can be attributed to Israeli Jews, he told Haaretz by phone from Maryland. That possibility is important. If it turns out to be true, it could connect European Jews to Israel. So, meaning, if they are bastard seeds of Israel pretending to be the whole seed, if they got one drop of nigger blood in them, they're pretending to be niggers the whole time. Pardon me. Right? These are the people that Hitler would have wiped out, right? Alright. Yeah, I'm just trying to be fact. I mean, we read his own fucking words. We read the actions that he actually did that weren't part of propaganda told here. We heard about the stuff that didn't have to do with the gas chambers that he did. States, however, even if it is true that connection is only a tiny part of the overall genome, a percentage is so small that it would reportedly not be statistically significant enough to show that the origin of the Jews is from the kingdom of Judea in the biblical land of Israel. So he's saying if one of their ancestors was black, out of the thousands that have lived, it's one drop in the bucket, and it doesn't stain the bucket. It's not a dark enough stain to make them Israelites. He's saying the root of their DNA is Western Europe. For what they call Western Europeans. They ain't from there. Alright, so it says a study did find that there's a genetic continuum linking the Jews of Iran, the Caucasus, the Azerbaijan, and Georgia with European Jews. So they're all Arabs. So you got Arabs. See, Germany is part of Arab society. Arab genome marker, whether they tend to be or not. Alright, so it says that among the various groupings of European and non-European Jews, there is no common genetic origin. Alright, so that's kind of weird. Of the groupings of Europeans and non-European Jews, no common genetic origin. So they just popped out of nowhere. The various groups of Jews in the world today do not share a common genetic origin. We're talking here about groups that are heterogeneous and which are connected solely by religion. The genome of European Jews is a mosaic of ancient peoples and its origin is largely Khazarian. Okay. It says, what about the much publicized studies which claim to show common genetic descent for Jews? It says many of these papers were written and books were written by noted professors and published by respected academic journals and publishers. For example, Oxford University Press published Legacy, A Genetic History of Jewish People. By Yeshiva University, it's Dr. Harry Orser, who teaches in his departments of pathology, genetics, and pediatrics in the university's Albert Einstein College of Medicine. He argues that genetics prove that Jews are one people with the Middle Eastern origin. Oh, see? Well, that's great. Now you've got one of these Jews that does genetic research himself and says that they're all linked. But we all know that, aside from what these two are saying, we all know these people are converts. All these people in Hollywood don't look alike. They come to Hollywood and then they become Jews. That's just one small grouping, one small community, just per se. It says Oyster found no significant evidence for a connection between the Jews and the Khazars. According to Oyster, genetically Jews are closer to Palestine, Bedouin, and Druze than to Khazars. How could Oyster and so many others have researched conclusions that are so very different from El Hayek's? Simple, El Hayek says. First, these researchers decided what conclusion they wanted to find, and then set off to find evidence to support it. He states, their research has no empirical empirical basis. Sometimes even contradicts itself and offers conclusions that are simply not convincing. It is my impression that their results were written before they began their research. First, they shot their arrow, and then they painted the bullseye around it. Wow, that's pretty nice. I like how that's said. Usually you got a bullseye set up and you're shooting at your arrow at the target, and this is different. You just shoot your arrow up wherever it falls, and then after it falls, go paint your target, and then tell everybody you hit the bullseye on this one. He says majority of Jews do not have Middle Eastern genetic component in the quantity we would expect to find if they were descendants of Jews of antiquity, he said. To Hayek, there is no uniquely Jewish gene because each human being has a genetic amalgam, and no population group has ever lived in total isolation from other population groups. Horowitz says that it asked a number of scholars from Israel and the diaspora, both historians and geneticists, what they thought about a Hayek's article. All of the historians declined to comment on Hayek's work, arguing that they were not geneticists. All the historians argue that they are not geneticists and lack the expertise needed to comment on his work. But every one of the geneticists Haaretz contacted also refused to comment. Some argued Haaretz's requests. Some ignored his requests and never answered at all. Other geneticists claimed they are unfamiliar with population research and therefore could not answer. Still, others claim they lack the time needed to answer the question. The only scholar who answered Haaretz's question was Tel Aviv University professor Shlomo Sand. Sand wrote the book The Invention of the Jewish People. It has now been translated into 22 languages. Despite what was until Hayek's work was published, a stacked deck of genetic research that opposed it. Sand has tough words for geneticists looking for Jewish genes. It says, for an ignoramus like me, genetics has always appeared to... I didn't really want to highlight that. I'm going to leave it highlighted. Geneticists have always appeared to be crowned with a halo as a precise science that deals with quantitative findings and whose conclusions are irrefutable. But I discovered Jewish geneticists whose knowledge of history ended that what was necessary for their higher matriculation exams, for their high school matriculation exams. All right, even though he claims he's an ignoramus, that one's beyond me. I discovered Jewish geneticists whose knowledge of history ended at what was necessary for their high school matriculation exam. Okay, I understand now. So they didn't know shit about history. Which is how I would describe my knowledge of biology. In high school, they had learned that there was one Jewish nation, and on the basis of that historic narrative, they reconstructed their scholarly findings. It says, but what really concerns Sand is the misuse of genetics to characterize people or nations, something the Nazis did with glee, and Sand rightly labels as dangerous. In the past, anyone who defined the Jews was a race was vilified as anti-Semite. Today, anyone who is unprepared to define them as a race is labeled an anti-Semite. Alright, so I think I'm gonna, he might have something. Okay, I used to think that that only in such disciplines as history and literature can facts be given various interpretations. But when I discovered that the same thing is done in genetics, it is very easy to showcase certain findings while marginalizing others, and to present your study as scholarly research. In general, speculation in genetics can create an incredibly high level of ignorance in history, Sand pointed out. Well, that is very, very powerful. The problem is, most people don't understand power. So, sometimes you gotta show them a little force.
For our people, they always said that gold was no good, it'll make you sick. And as we come to find out today, that sickness is greed.
There is a reason why the royal families have been funding expeditions to this area. They've all come here looking for something.
I won't show anybody where it's at. All I say is in those mountains.
I do believe that treasure has a power or life of its own. I think if something has a real dark history, that spirit, that feeling, those curses may follow it. There's been some pretty dark historical events associated with lost treasure.
He knew that gold was there, you see. He knew what gold. The mother lode.
These kids that want to just jump into these holes and go walking around and exploring can find themselves dead.
People talk about seeing spirits of Indians.
Don't go near the light.
I think some things are not meant to be found.
I've always called it kind of like a secret society. Come down in this hole, hurry.
We're not miners. We're treasure hunters. We're truth seekers. Mystery unravelers. I'm called Digger amongst the fellow treasure hunters. We've got a lot of incredible people that work with me.
Hey, Dan. Is there a heart on that map?
Jose Mas Maria.
That looks like a heart to me.
The amount of gold and silver they pulled out of these mountains, the Spaniards did. There's a king's mine over there. Yeah.
Every one of them seem to have their own little talents.
When you bring a large group of people together that all have different pieces of the puzzle, all of a sudden that map that you have, it says X marks the spot.
When people call me and say, hey, we'd like you to help us and we're going to give you a percentage, I always say, no, you won't. Because once you see that yellow gold, you'll forget all about me.
Oh my God.
I'm a archaeologist and an author and a Spanish mine researcher. We're looking for a lost mine and a treasure. There's only a small group that I work with. Before coming to an area, I do research to see if there's any activity, either anciently or by the Spaniards or by an Indian group. Then I begin to hunt for maps or clues or whatever I might discover. I'll come into an area and I'll start looking for signs and symbols. That's the gold sign right there.
The circle and the dot.
Circle the dot, and if you follow this, it'll take you right over. But most of my work comes right from these two things in my head, my eyes. There's a spring that's on the map, a spring, and then just beyond the spring, we just need to keep following on the road and get on the other side of this hill. We should be able to find more signs to take us to the symbols we really want.
I know for a fact it's out there. I've seen things I can't really talk about.
All of a sudden, I just got that feeling where I was like, you know what? I'm being watched. I don't like this. It's an eerie feeling. For how many thousands of hours of researching, I kind of feel like that I owe it to my family in a way, and I feel like I want to prove myself to my family at the same time that I'm not just wasting my time. I'm out here because I believe that it's out here, and I believe that I can find it.
stuff really happened. That's what gets me into it, is wanting to know more and going further and wanting to find stuff that people haven't found.
When we find the mother lode, it's just going to change everything.
No way!
The cross just tells you that you're at a mine site.
We know that one lead in that direction is a mine. So hope you got your hiking shoes on.
Hey, Dan, how you doing?
What are you guys up to?
Oh, I've been up chasing little gold today.
It's easy for everybody to get up here. Probably a lot of the stuff will be found already.
I've made almost $250,000.
There are quite a few treasures, I think, that are still hidden.
Oh my God. Steve!
Somebody found 500 gold bars.
I can smell the gas exploding.
Why are the Indians so afraid to go there? And he says, well, because it contains the war box. And it's killed several of our people.
Whoa, Dave, look at that.
Go there, and he says, well, because it contains the war box. And it's killed several of our people.
I can smell the gas exploding.
Why are the Indians so afraid to go there? And he says, well, because it contains the war box. Why are the Indians so afraid to go there? And he says, well, because it contains the war box. So afraid to go there, and he says, well, because it contains the war box. So afraid.
These are Canaanites. They're afraid to go near the war box, the ark. They can't touch it. These Caucasians can't touch it.
To go there, and he says, well, because it contains the war box. And it's killed several of our people.
It's killed the Canaanites. So of course it's going to kill the Caucasians.
Because it contains the war box. And it's killed several of our people.
Whoa, Dave, look at that. What is that?
It's just like, oh, just get all excited.
Oh my God, look at this.
This whole mountain is just full of all kinds of history that people don't know about, just waiting to be discovered.
Whoa, Dave, look at that.
So afraid to go there, and he says, well, because it contains the war box.
That's where the box is. It's not that hard when you're sitting back in a chair. Gotta go there.
Because it contains the war box. And it's killed several of our people.
Whoa, Dave, look at that. What is that?
It's just like, oh, just get all excited.
Oh my God, look.
So, you're not African. You're Aboriginal. Because your ancestors came over here. And you look like an African. Because you're a Negro. Now, they're all Canaanites that look like you. But they're not you. But you're not getting this. Because you don't want to piece all these pieces together. You are Indians. You are Aboriginals. But you're a separate type. And our base was out here in Utah. That's why everything's... It was like our safe. And these people keep going in and trying to crack our safe. You will leave with the riches. The United States doesn't have anything but paper money. If paper money fails, then the paper money that you think is valuable is then worthless. The only thing that's of any and those children and the minerals and the ark. Moses took them to a new land given to them by God. He was their Messiah. Do you get it? He was their Messiah. We need to mount together to be able to leave this land together.